In the late 1990s, one name dominated South Korea's business landscape. Daewoo Group stood as a towering symbol of the country's economic miracle, a sprawling empire that reached into over 100 countries and employed more than 300,000 people. From automobiles to shipbuilding, Daewoo seemed unstoppable, but beneath the surface, one of the most spectacular corporate frauds in history was unfolding. This is the story of how a $43 billion deception brought down South Korea's second-largest conglomerate. The story begins with Kim Woo-choong, born in 1936 in Daegu. During the Korean War, his father was kidnapped by communists and taken to North Korea. At 14, Kim became his family's sole provider, selling newspapers and working his way through school. He graduated from Kyungi High School and earned an economics degree from Yonsei University in Seoul. In 1967, at age 30, Kim borrowed $10,000 and founded Daewoo Industrial Company. The name means Great Universe in Korean. It was ambitious for a tiny one-room textile business, but Kim had vision and connections to South Korea's power elite. Kim's timing was perfect. South Korea was implementing aggressive economic plans to transform from a war-torn economy into an industrial powerhouse. The government favoured large conglomerates called chaebols, providing cheap loans in exchange for driving exports. Daewoo became one of the chosen champions. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Daewoo expanded at breathtaking pace into heavy industry, shipbuilding, automobiles, electronics, and construction. When pushed into shipbuilding, Kim was initially reluctant but made it work. Daewoo took over failing companies and turned them profitable, establishing joint ventures globally. By the mid-90s, Daewoo ranked 18th on Fortune's Global 500 list, with interests in 100 countries through 600 overseas subsidiaries. Kim became a national hero. His autobiography, Every Street is Paved with Gold, became a bestseller, inspiring young entrepreneurs. But Kim's expansion carried enormous risks. Daewoo's growth was built on massive debt, relying on government-backed loans and the assumption that chaebols were too big to fail. The company employed cross-guarantees, where subsidiaries guaranteed each other's debts, creating a dangerous web that masked true financial health. Then, 1997 brought the Asian financial crisis. Currencies plummeted, interest rates skyrocketed, and foreign investors fled. Companies that had relied on cheap foreign loans suddenly couldn't service their debts. The government itself in distress could no longer provide unlimited credit. Most Korean conglomerates responded by cutting back. Samsung and LG trimmed operations and reduced debt. But Kim saw the crisis as an opportunity. In 1998, even as the crisis deepened, Daewoo added 14 new companies to its portfolio. That year, the group lost 550 billion won on sales of 62 trillion won. Yet Kim pushed forward, investing billions more in automotive acquisitions worldwide. The strategy was reckless and doomed. Behind the scenes, Daewoo was hiding a financial catastrophe through massive accounting fraud. Executives inflated sales with fake export receipts, concealed debts using off-balance sheet schemes, and shifted losses between subsidiaries using inflated transactions. Daewoo Corporation's London operations fabricated over $12 billion in fraudulent assets. Auditors missed or ignored the deception, while bribes ensured regulators didn't ask questions. The system depended on constant new loans to pay old debts and maintain the facade. By early 1999, the house of cards was beginning to wobble. Banks grew increasingly nervous about Daewoo's massive debt load. The company was struggling to roll over its short-term loans, and creditors were demanding answers. In August 1999, Daewoo announced it would restructure, but the revelation of the company's true financial condition sparked panic among investors and creditors alike. On November 1st, 1999, Daewoo was declared bankrupt with debts estimated between $50 and $80 billion. It was the largest bankruptcy in world history at that time, a record that would stand until the collapses of Enron and WorldCom, though Daewoo's failure arguably surpassed even those if equity losses are excluded from the calculation. The full extent of the fraud began to emerge as prosecutors launched investigations. What they uncovered was staggering. Korean prosecutors claimed that Daewoo's companies had inflated assets by over $19 billion. The accounting manipulations totaled approximately 23 trillion won, or about $15 billion, making it one of the largest corporate accounting frauds ever discovered. The fraud had concealed roughly $12.5 billion in debt through off-balance sheet schemes alone. Kim Woo-choong, once celebrated as a visionary captain of industry, now faced criminal charges of epic proportions. Rather than face justice, he fled South Korea and went into hiding. For 6 years, Kim lived as a fugitive, moving between countries, reportedly spending time in France and Vietnam. Back in South Korea, angry former Daewoo factory workers posted wanted posters with his picture. Thousands of investors who had trusted Daewoo bonds and stocks lost their life savings. Some, devastated by their losses, took their own lives. The collapse of Daewoo sent shockwaves through South Korea's economy and beyond. Tens of thousands of workers lost their jobs as the conglomerate's pieces were sold off or shut down. Creditor banks faced enormous losses that threatened the stability of the entire financial system. The scandal exposed deep problems in Korea's chaebol system, the cozy relationships between business and government, the weak corporate governance that allowed executives to operate with minimal oversight, the reckless lending practices by banks that assumed government guarantees, and the moral hazard created by the widespread belief that giant conglomerates would always be rescued from failure. In June 2005, Kim Woo-choong finally returned to South Korea. He arrived at Seoul Airport and was immediately arrested. In court, prosecutors laid out the full scope of his crimes. Kim was charged with masterminding accounting fraud worth $43.4 billion. He faced additional charges of illegally borrowing $10.3 billion and smuggling $3.2 billion out of the country. There were also accusations of bribery totaling close to $1 billion. The trial revealed how Kim had orchestrated the systematic deception across hundreds of subsidiaries worldwide. He had directed executives to hide losses, fabricate revenues, and manipulate financial statements to present a false picture of profitability and growth. The cross-guarantee system he had championed allowed debts to be shuffled and concealed between related companies. The aggressive overseas expansion had been financed through fraudulent means, with fake documentation supporting billions in phantom assets. Financial statements had been so thoroughly manipulated that it remained unclear even years later exactly how much debt Daewoo had actually accumulated. On May 30th, 2006, Kim Woo-choong was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The court also ordered him to forfeit $22 billion and pay additional fines. On the final day of his trial, a tearful Kim addressed the court with words that would become infamous. He said, "I cannot dodge my responsibility of wrongly buttoning up the final button of fate. It was an admission of guilt, though one that many felt fell short of truly accepting responsibility for the devastation he had caused." Kim's lawyers argued that he had been trying to save Daewoo, that his aggressive expansion during the crisis was an attempt to grow the company out of trouble, not a criminal scheme. But prosecutors and victims saw it differently. They argued that Kim had knowingly concealed the company's true condition, borrowed more money under false pretenses, and enriched himself while knowing the entire edifice would eventually collapse. The Daewoo scandal prompted significant reforms in South Korea. The government strengthened regulations on chaebols, improved accounting standards, and enhanced corporate governance requirements. Banks became more cautious about lending to conglomerates. The era of unlimited credit and government favoritism began to wane, replaced by greater emphasis on transparency and market discipline. In 2007, Kim received a presidential pardon and was released from prison. He never fully accepted blame for Daewoo's collapse, often pointing to government policies and economic conditions as the real culprits. Some former Daewoo executives who still called themselves Daewoo men went on to lead other Korean companies, carrying with them lessons learned from the catastrophic failure. Kim Woo-choong died in December 2019 at the age of 82. His death prompted mixed reactions in South Korea. Some remembered him as a pioneer who had helped build their country's industrial base and inspire a generation of entrepreneurs. Others saw him as a symbol of everything that was wrong with the chaebol system: the arrogance, the corruption, the reckless risk-taking, and the devastating consequences when ambition outstripped ethics and sound judgment. The Daewoo fraud remains one of the largest accounting scandals in corporate history. The $43 billion deception dwarfed most other frauds and stood as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked corporate power, weak oversight, and the toxic combination of ambition and deception. The collapse destroyed hundreds of thousands of lives, wiped out billions in shareholder value, and left scars on South Korea's economy that took years to heal. Today, the Daewoo name has largely disappeared from South Korea, surviving only in scattered remnants of what was once a mighty empire. General Motors purchased Daewoo Motor. Other divisions were sold, restructured, or simply ceased to exist. The lavish hotels that Kim's wife had decorated with fine art stand as monuments to an era of excess and ambition that ended in spectacular failure. The story of Daewoo serves as a powerful reminder that no company, no matter how large or successful it appears, is immune to the consequences of fraud and mismanagement. It demonstrates how accounting tricks can hide reality only for so long before the truth emerges with devastating force, and it shows that personal ambition, no matter how initially noble or inspiring, can lead to catastrophe when unchecked by ethics, transparency, and accountability. The great universe that Kim Woo-choong imagined turned out to be built on sand, and when the tide went out, everyone could see that Daewoo had been swimming naked all along.